Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Tapestry Day. Tapestry is a green tea. And we're in the midst. This is the middle point of the green tea series that we're doing. Last week, we had this fabulous, interesting green light. Tapestry will be no less interesting, it'll be different. Let's launch into this a bit and talk about green tea, especially its traditional connection to China. Because if you talk to Chinese about tea, Chinese in China, that is, and they enjoy tea, invariably the conversation winds back around to green tea. Why is this? Is it because green tea was the first tea? Is it because green tea is the most interesting of teas? So, to answer this question, we need to think about the culture of green tea as it developed. Historically, tea has been around for 3, 4, 5,000 years. Actually, the plant's been around for millions of years, probably 65 million or so. But human interaction with the tea plant, at least 5,000, maybe up to 10,000 years of interaction. Somebody was in the shop yesterday and talked about, and Rob was part of this conversation as well, as was Jonathan, talked about, is it the tea teaches us, or we somehow teach the tea? Is there an interconnection? Well, there clearly is an interconnection between humans and tea. How that occurred feels miraculous. And so, how does this translate to the history of green tea? Let's think about this for a moment. Green tea, from the traditional scholar standpoint, traditional historian standpoint, was the first of the teas. And whether we think now, oh, maybe there was a form that was closer to white, or we stick with the traditional, it doesn't much matter. We know that green tea was dominant by the 4th century AD. And really realizing that green tea really suggests unoxidized tea. That's really what it stands for. This category rose right to the top in China and still stays at the top today. So back when green tea was in its development stage, so let's call that from the turn, let's call that from about 100 BC all the way up to, let's say, 1500. So 1500 years of development. What are the key points in that development? Sometime in that 4th century, everybody in China essentially was steaming the tea to stop oxidation. So that was kind of a high point, because as they experimented with that, they saw, we can get some different flavors if we steam X amount of time versus a shorter time. So they were competing or working with that. Now, I introduced a word just now, which is important, competing, because by the Tang Dynasty, so that's 618 to 960 or so, by the Tang Dynasty, there truly is a culture of competition among elitists, not elitists, scholars, monks, officials, and aficionados. And this competition grew more and more complicated as the Tang Dynasty developed. So in the beginning, it's just, let's sit around, let's get some green tea, let's make it, let's talk about where our water comes from. Let's all bring individual spring waters in. We'll compare water and tea because the Chinese understood early water is the basis of a successful tea. Great water, great brewing equals great tea. Bad water, great brewing equals bad tea. Now, if you didn't have the great brewing in that equation, bad goes to terrible. So they understood, and in these competitions, were bringing in water, and they were bragging. Oh yeah, I went down to the Yellow Mountains. Oh, and there's this creek down there, fresh snow melt. I got that water, and I transported 1,000 miles to here, and this is what we're going to have tonight. So that was part of the competition. What was the other part? Hey, bro, I have some of this great tea from Hunan province. I brought some with me. We're going to try that tonight. So everybody was advancing their teas. They were advancing their waters. And as the competitions became more elaborate, which they did, by the way, people started to invent things. They started to be creative. You know, there is the thought sometimes that Americans are the only ones who are really, really creative. But back in the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese who lived in that era were truly creative. What led or what created this sense of creativity? Well, a couple things. First off, the dynasty, let me put it this way, the peoples in the government were of many different ethnicities. So there was a mix of people. You had people coming in, they were Chinese minorities, they were minorities outside of China, all participating, all having input. Does this sound like America a little bit? Many different peoples. There was great openness to different ways of thinking about things. So this element caused people to go through these competitions. Hey, what if I put in a little magnolia in this? What if I put in a little rose? Oh, you know what? I'm going to put in a little peel of a citrus fruit. And so as they created the green tea cakes, because remember, by that time, almost all the tea was not loose leaf, it was in cakes. And they chipped these cakes off, grind them up, because remember, matcha was invented in China. Of course, they didn't call it matcha at that time. They actually did. They used the Chinese version of that, cha. And they grind it up, put some water in, boink, serve. So green tea was the object of all of this. There weren't any other styles. You had this sense of creativity. It was steamed. So much like Japanese green tea today, you had more of a sense of grassiness. You had not as wide a range of flavors as you have today. And again, what changed that and when did it happen? In the Sung dynasty, somewhere in probably the thousands or 1100s, they started to fry the tea instead of steam. So again, we're still green tea. We're frying it, we're making cakes, still chipping it off, still grinding it up, still having competitions. Poets writing about it, officials making sure that they send up the best of the tea to the emperor. Emperor gets green tea from all over China. And everybody's hoping that he mentions that, hey, this is the bomb. Everybody should have this so that their green tea would become famous. So over time, this set of habits did start to create famousness among certain of the green teas. And remember, there was at least a 1500-year period of development. And again, the key elements of that, hey, let's start steaming this stuff. B, let's put it in cakes. C, hey, let's have some fun. Let's compete with one another. Oh, and by the way, while we're competing, let's make sure we make the other element, which we don't talk about very much, and that is the water. Let's make sure we're getting the best of that. And by the way, I'm going to take a small digression here. And we had in this discussion yesterday morning something that popped up. And it's really important to understand this concept because it's big in China. And everybody talks about cha shui. So the literal translation is tea water. And so occasionally you'll hear the boss refer to the tea water, because that's really how it pictures in her head. Now you hear the understudy make up every other term. Oh, tea liquor, tea liquid, all these banal terms. But in Chinese, it's tea water. It's an acknowledgement that both the water and the tea leaves themselves tell the story. They truly do tell the story, and that they're equally present and important in the description of that story. And to this day, in the tea establishment and among tea aficionados in China, they use this way. They use this expression, cha shui, and they especially use it in relationship to green tea. But it's not exclusive, by the way. It is used in relationship to all the teas. But you almost always hear this as people talk about green tea. All right, so in addition to what I mentioned, steaming, contest, creativity, the other big change was, hey, let's fry. You know, I like that flavor change. I want some fried green tea. 1,500 years of development. Part of that development was taking apart. So in 1368, what happens? New emperor comes to the throne and says, look, folks, and actually his document said first words, obey. And then he said, look, folks, no more tea cakes. Too hard on the farmers. We're going to just drink tea, loose leaf. So that was the last 200 years of that 1,500 years of development. And so that was a do-over, so to speak. Let's stop making cakes. Let's do it loosely. And that created this great big period of chaos in the tea industry. What sort of chaos? Well, heck, I'm so used to grinding up this tea, I don't need to do that anymore. No grinding tea, no more tea cakes. So I can just use the loose leaf. And how should we handle this loose leaf? And what else should we be doing as we do the process of the tea? So a lot of questions opened up, a lot of opportunities opened up by this change. But the Chinese cultural psyche had already congealed around green tea. So green tea I better not use what I'm about to say. I'm about to say it was in the genome, but we all know that that's not quite true. It was in the cultural genome. That's where it was. And so you had these green teas that already had great fame. Dragonwell, Wong's Creation, Clouds and Mist, Green Sanctity. You had probably about 10 heirloom, that's right, 10 very, very famous green teas as you're going into the 1600s. And again, how do these things become famous? They become famous because they taste really good, or an emperor writes about them, or a poet writes about them, and others try and say, oh my God, this is unique. This is good. Why isn't green light among those that I just listed? Last week we tried it. It's every bit as good as those others because it's this very tiny area of craft tea. China has hundreds of these craft teas. And if you're lucky enough to get one of the green light level, then suddenly you don't go back. You say to yourself, okay, he said there are 100. Well, now there are only 99 that I haven't tried. I'm going to go one by one and find every one of these other 99 and taste them because I'm so blown away by how good these at this level of green tea are. So those 10 plus 100. And 100 is a figurative number here. I don't know the true number of craft teas. In some places, they have craft teas that come from 3 bushes. Will you ever be able to drink those? Not unless we're gifted them in some way. But we know that those things exist deep in the psyche. So what else is deep in the psyche? In the cultural psyche is what I'm talking about here. That is that great green tea is not bitter, needs to be handled carefully, and has the subtlest and greatest secrets within it.
Elena, can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, some fruit? I'm still looking.
So part of this understanding is that it's not, you all have had the cliff teas. You've all had great red teas. You've had ancient teas, ancient fermented teas. You've had all these teas and they're amazing. But the green teas don't leave the track of amazing, even though their scope may be a little bit narrower. What do I mean by maybe a little bit narrower? Well, let's think about this again. With cliff teas, you're going to have light, you're going to have medium, you're going to have heavy, you're going to have sweet, you're going to have just this whole range of flavors. Green teas, you're going to have something, if it's any good, that's fresh. You're going to have something, if it's any good, that's subtle. And so all these tea masters, they drink all over the board, but they come back to green tea. They come back to the greatness of green tea in that subtlety of flavor. There's a lot going on in green tea. And there's a lot that Westerners get wrong with green tea. What do they get wrong? We have people that come in. Doctor told me to drink green tea. I hate green tea. It's bitter. But the doc said I got to do it. So I got to swallow this bitter pill, so to speak. Well, they've come to the wrong place. Because as it turns out, here, we don't do bitter. And as it turns out in China, at the best of the tea houses, do they do bitter? No, that's not in their vocabulary. They do subtle, they do rich, they do modulated temperature, and they do great water. That's what they do. Oh, and by the way, we do that here as well. So this is the panorama against which green tea needs to be seen, needs to be measured, because it gets lost sometimes in the glitteriness of some of the other great teas. But at the end of the day, does the boss and do I return to green tea? We do. We love green tea. We may not talk about it in the same way that we talk about some of these other teas, but it turns out we're drinking green tea virtually every day. And we drink hot. High, not that type of high. Let's restate that. I'm wearing my linen today, so I gotta state this very accurately. We drink very craft green tea. And that means you have lots of subtleties going on in that tea. And that's the greatness of what you have here and what you have in the good places in China. And that's kind of gives you an understanding why when the Chinese in the 1950s established the 10 greatest teas in China. I love that. The 10 greatest teas. 7,500 teas, and you're going to pick the 10 greatest. Well, we've already proven in here that that's impossible to do. However, they did it. And how did they do that? They thought about tradition. It's very interesting. They went back to tradition and said, okay, the subtlety and the mix of flavors, where do we get the best and most interesting flavors? And they landed on green tea. And so out of those first 10, 6 or 7 of them were green teas. Then in 59, they upgraded that list. Still 10. Oh, they swapped out one green tea for another green tea. Not very much of an upgrade. And even today, it's in the culture. When you talk about tea, and when you talk about greatness of Chinese tea, you talk about green tea. Why is it that in this shop, except in a session like this, we focus on all the teas? Because we find greatness in all the teas. But I want to tip my hat to those first 1,500 years or the first 2,000 years of development of tea, because the green teas that were developed during those first couple thousand years, incredible. And the flavors that we get today, truly incredible. So what are we getting today? We're getting Tapestry. And where is that from? That's from Hubei. So Hubei is in central China. Does this grow on magnificent mountains at 10,000 feet above sea level, with goddesses and gods swirling around and making sure that the land is perfect, and that the environment and terroir, the god terroir is perfect? The answer is no. So this is at a much lower elevation. But what's good about this area is there's very little pollution in this area. And there never has been much development. And there is forest in this area. So you have a nice area, but is it magnificent in the way the Yellow Mountains are magnificent? No, it's not. Is it beautiful in the way the Idaho Mountains are beautiful? Yeah, kind of. And does it have history? Maybe it has history, real history. And yes, it does. Zhuge Liang, this famous strategist who lived in 200 or 300, somewhere around there, I can't remember, lived there. And people made pilgrimages to this area to visit him and to drink the tea. This is the area where this tea comes from. So in China, let me ask you this question. Is this tea easily accessible? And the answer is no. So how did we get it? The usual. We just go around and drop into farms and try stuff and ask and years of doing this. This is how we found this stuff. This farmer is famous in the tea industry. And he's famous because he's also an agricultural scientist. And as such, he presents papers. He has his hand in both the science and the agriculture. But he's not so famous that people in China would recognize the name. They wouldn't recognize the name. He's only famous for those who are in the tea science area. And he's only really locally famous in Hubei because people who drink his tea are mostly from Hubei. They're mostly there and realize, oh my gosh, this stuff is really good. And it's not some new hybridized thing. This thing has been around forever. So you've heard all this setup for this tea. Gosh, I hope it's good. It's time for the tea master to go ahead and demonstrate and to make sure that the tea water, cha shui, reaches those heights and takes you to places where you want to go. So it is with great pleasure that I bring the controller of the tea water,
Yes.
the tea master, Pichu.
Yeah, today we do the so many green tea. So
So you notice her tableau. She's actually going to make several cups. Your tableau would be -2 cups. You might not have a teapot, but you will have at least 2 cups illustrated. That's what's required. The other thing that's required is 170-degree water. You'll find that as you work with the best of the green teas, generally speaking, they need low temperature. And if you're going to err on temperature, err low, be lower, don't be higher. Heat all the cups. You use any temperature water between 170 to 212. Make sure they're clean. And then you'll enter your rhythm. Now, speaking of rhythm, wait a minute, I better not take a digression here. Just about to take I'll take a digression in a minute. So keep focusing on this. So you notice that not in a hurry, just trying to make sure that there's a steady cadence to this and not forget any of the steps. Because there are steps. Drawing the 175-degree water, which Tea Master will cool. Aerate the water, dissipate the steam. Normal procedure, but very, very important for the green teas. And you're used to this. It's rhythmical. Just being present. And she pours the water back into the kettle so that she can control the flow of water into the cup. Wraps the tapestry, puts it in the cup. This is 4 grams. This is going to be a 2-minute steep per steep. Shaking the leaves, try and get heat distributed in them, on them, and adding the water. And there's some things to notice instantly, as I set the timer for 2 minutes. The very first thing to notice instantly is it looks like, at least from a distance, that this thing has trichomes. Looks a little cloudy. That's a good thing. Lots of trichomes. Okay, so ooh, a nice green color too. A ton of trichomes in here. Okay. So I said I was going to take a digression. I'll do that right now. This will be a short digression. When you are serving tea, it's really, really important. And this came up in the conversation yesterday. It's really interesting because we had a chef in here yesterday morning, the group. And part of what he said, and it's so true, and I don't know why I haven't talked about this, because in China, they instantly get this. When you make people tea, do not get between them and the tea. If you get between them and the tea, that's a fail. People all have different ways of appreciating the teas. You get them at the highest level of execution and allow them to appreciate and execute as they would execute an appreciation of the tea. So that was something, sounds simple, hard to do. All right. First cup, all done. You know, it's not in a hurry, just very steady. Second cup, done. So looking at this, as I said, you already see the cloudiness. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We're going to enter the tea arena. God, this is great. See, I didn't tell you how great. I didn't describe exactly what makes it great. You're going to describe that to me, but not yet. And by the way, if you haven't yet, get out your notes from last week because this is different than last week. You're going to enter the tea arena. 170-degree sip. Cover the tongue. We're going to look for astringency. We're going to look for aftertaste and then energetics. Oh yeah, this is not green light. This is something different. And instantly, because you've taken good notes, you'll get that difference. There is definite astringency on my tongue. I have an aftertaste. I don't have energetics yet. Let's get flavor and aroma and reinforce what I first got. Not in a hurry. You notice we're just doing this in the rhythm. There's lots there. It's your turn to brew. So make sure you get your 170-degree water. Set your timer for 2 minutes. And remember, this is bag number 2 labeled Tapestry. 4 grams, 170 degrees, 2 minutes for the first scoop. It's rhythmic. And by the way, you notice when she does this, she pours both inside and outside and then discards the water. So that was the cleaning step right there. Cleaning, and I should say heating, because you want these cups to have a certain temperature. It's very rhythmical, not in a hurry. Now that you've got your cups ready, you'll add the tea leaves. Shake them up. Really trying to distribute the heat among them. Make sure you have the tea that you think you have. Then you add the water. Set your timer for 2 minutes. You get an instant replay here. Very consistent. This is how your rhythm should be as well. Very consistent. Okay. So what type of pick is this? This is a spring pick. And it's one bud and sometimes one leaf, sometimes 2 leaves. Yes,
One of the participants, Kathy shares, leaves were dark green compared to last week's more yellowish leaves, very fresh.
great catch. Dark green leaves compared to last week's yellowish leaves. They look very, very fresh. And that is, by the way, one of the characteristics of this particular farmer's style of doing tea. His stuff is always very, in some ways, though I hate to use this term, it's the feeling I have in my heart of a lusciousness of greenery. And that's how he does his teas. That for him is the right way to make this craft. And the question arises about craft and actually varietal, because this varietal has been around for a long time. And the craft matches what this varietal demands. And this is the thing. And again, this was part of the discussion that was unsaid yesterday that occurred in here about the tea and humans and the communication between tea and humans. There is clearly a communication, and humans experiment with the tea until they get it right. Okay, your timer should have gone off. You should have the tea in front of you, and let's go ahead and enter the tea arena.
Jonathan shares, I think they got this one right.
Great comment. Jonathan notes that the particular farmer here got this one right. And I concur. And when you're, yes, I talked about the pick, spring pick. This is a pre-Qingming jig. So this is an early spring pick. And they go through a relatively recognizable process. However, having said that, they actually go through the rolling and shaping part of the process twice. So there's a little bit of difference in how they put this together. And I assume, although I don't know for sure, that they're using a different level of force when they go through that. And that's one of the ways that they're able to retain so much greenness to this tea. they probably also are frying it on average a little less time than some of the other greens.
Jonathan follows up, seriously though, even though the astringency is there, the balance of flavor is incredible.
Jonathan notes, and I concur. There is astringency. There's definitely astringency there. That proves it has polyphenols in it. But he further notes, and here's the key, the balance of flavors is wonderful. The balance of flavors is very evident.
Rob shares, the scent of the warm leaves was umami in the front with a light malt in the background. And then the steeped leaves were vegetal, but the tea water was very mildly vegetal and round in its scent.
Three things here. The flavor of the actual tea itself, round and slightly vegetal. The wet leaves, very vegetal, and the dry leaves, malty and umami. And this is a great way to enter the tea arena or the quality arena by going through each of these steps and evaluating. And again, at the end of the day, you get that initial malty and umami. How do you end up with round and slightly vegetal? This is the craft and magic of what we do in this shop. Yes.
Kathy shares, the flavors seem to build as I take more sips.
Flavor builds as Kathy takes more sips. Love this comment because it builds for me. It's almost as if the first time through, I'm so focused on what is this flavor. And I'm thinking about that and making my mental notes. Second time through, oh my gosh, this flavor is getting deeper. It's not leaving my mouth. It's still there and accelerating, so to speak. Great catch on that, Kathy.
Rob notes, the astringency of this tea comes with a velvety feel on my tongue.
Ah, this is great. Rob notes that there's astringency, but it's not just that. There is this velvety feel in his mouth. And I ask you, and that's a great observation because I get that velvety. And I further ask everybody, is this like green light?
Jonathan observes, more viscous than green light.
Okay, more viscous than green light. Absolutely.
Rob says, the taste reminds me of ocean seaweed vegetal.
Ocean seaweed vegetal on the taste. Good. So while you're thinking about this, one of the things that I would posit is that there's also a slight surprising underlying nuttiness to this. It's very much underlying, but it's there. And if you think back to green light, was that there? And the answer is it, for me, was not. And when you say, remember last week, I led with something. as we were going through this process. I said, oh, sometimes I always have a list of what I think my favorite green teas are. And then I taste one during one of these tastings and I realize, oops, that should have been on the list. This is another one that for me absolutely has to be on the list. And for a different reason than last week. Yes,
Kathy finds this to be more complex than green.
perfect. Now we're talking. Kathy says that in that balance, in that velvetiness, in the roundness, there is more complexity, a lot more going on. Green light was a little bit easier to read, so to speak. This thing has its mystery. It's not giving it up easily. It appears to be in the beginning. Oh yeah, let me show you some umami and malty. Yeah, we'll do a little vegetal in there. And if you're distracted enough, you'll just go through the whole cup and you won't realize it. There's all this other stuff. And Jonathan's opening comment captured balance. Well, you can't have balance unless you have things in there that you're balancing. And that's what's going on here. Yes.
Rob shares, Sue came by and took a sip and said it was nutty and reminds her a bit of fava beans.
That's interesting. Rob's wife took a sip, caught that nuttiness, and said almost like a fava bean. And all of those would fit into a way to think about this tea. Yes.
Jonathan asks, do you differentiate between your use of the word velvety and what I might call viscosity?
Oh, this is a great question. The V question. Velvety and viscosity. Is there a distinction? And the answer is, in my mind, there is. So when you say viscosity, as you did, Jonathan, I think of that as covering my mouth. When I believe it was Rob said velvety, I think of that as a softness in the mouth. So that's how I look. They brought two very different images, although even as you ask this question, I realize they're linked together, but still two different images. Great question.
Would tea literati use either? Is his follow-up.
Oh, this is a great question. Would the tea literati in China use either of the terms? And they definitely would use viscous, without question. And there's a particular word that they use, chun, thick, viscous. And they would use balance, as you used earlier. They definitely use that. I think Kathy mentioned fresh. They would definitely use that. The nutty would be used in this one. Those are the terms that the Chinese would let's back up a minute. They would get umami, even though they might not use it. If it were brought up, they would say, yeah, I get that. Yes. And they would be more likely to use vegetal than umami, but they would understand that continuum. Yeah.
Rob explains, velvety was how my tongue felt after the interaction with the tea. I think of the viscosity about as how the tea feels against the tongue at the time of the interaction. So I think the velvety was more about my tongue and viscosity more about the tea.
Oh, I like that because the chun that I'm talking about is about the tea and about what they call nung ho. And so that nung ho has the sense of I use this advisedly because I really don't want to hear this very often, but heavy and thick. And instead of heavy, I've used the wrong term. What I should have said, I'm getting it better translated in my head. Density. There's density to it. And I like the feel when you use density because this tea, compared to some of the other greens, this has density. It's almost, here's what the Chinese would say, by the way. It's almost like you're having a meal with this tea. That's what they would say because it's that dense, so to speak. I love doing these sessions with you. These are incredible explorations that we all go through. And we're very lucky to have you to share this with. And so I want to thank you for your inputs on this. It's really, really good. I also want to take a small digression here. Let's see how I'm doing on time. Oh, yes, this will be a small digression. And thank all of you who from time to time bring up other very interesting and unique crafts or sayings of stuff. So Kay last week sent us a short video about knives in this village in China. It's not a village. Kumamoto is actually a sizable town in Kyushu. But within there was a knife maker, and I don't know, 17 generations in Kumamoto. And this video talks a little bit about the history of them. And it's the same thing of, talk about being present. When you're doing knives, you kind of have to be present. You can't have a wandering minds create accidents. These are not good accidents. But the more to the point, it went through the craft and then the importance of lineage. And this was an amazing story because some person from America who currently lives in Idaho actually became the 18th master of this particular tradition because studying in Japan, studying karate, and then just became interested in this craft and took it up. And what's brilliant about this video, and I really thank you, Kay, because you captured the fact that when we get fully engaged and have a passion about doing things, we learn stuff and we are able to detect stuff that the rest of the population who's casual about it doesn't know. And these gradations you're capturing in the tea. And it's not that, oh, all of a sudden he put these things in today's tea. No, they were always there. What it is you progressed in this craft. You're in the Sophie's lineage, so to speak. And I'm now truly kidding because this is not, again, I hate it when things become a cult or, that's not what I meant. This was a joke about how much you have absorbed the knowledge and are able to skillfully use it. So this is really a compliment to you. And again, hey, sending me that video, this was also a compliment to all of you because she recognized, yeah, this is about attention to detail, being present, and then being able to recapitulate that. So these are the things we love when you share those with us. Yes.
Rob drills down a little more as well and says, I think there is a deeper question here about exactly what we mean by interaction. Often most people take the causes and effects of each direction of an event between two things to be almost simultaneous, but in general, that's not the case.
That's a great comment. Causes and effects. That's really a great comment. Read that one again, because there's one part of that I really, really like, especially near the end. Well, go ahead and read the
Yeah,
whole
no,
thing.
it says, often most people take causes and effects of each direction of an event between two things.
That's right.
to
Each
be
direction of an
almost
event.
simultaneous, but in general, that's not the case. But we're registering it as such, but it's not.
It's not the case. Yeah, you're exactly right. That is a hugely thoughtful comment and a great thing for us to end on, because this is something, a topic we can pick up again next week as we go through yet another interesting and different green tea. You, during this green tea extravaganza, these 3 green teas are getting a chance to do what every person in the Chinese elite would like to do. And that is side by side by side by side, go through these top teas, because that's how you start to get them placed in your mind. And that's why I can easily make the comment to you. Yeah, I was wrong last week. I only added green light. I should have added green light and Tapestry to this list of green teas that are so attractive to me that when I think of them and their qualities, I want that cup of tea. And I want it in the same way that in the cultural genome of Chinese who are in the tea, that they understand this green tea and the complexities and the wonderfulness of this beverage. All right, enough of this. I'm almost getting into the mysticism state. And remember, I'm wearing linen today, so as the tea master has reminded me, you're only supposed to tell the truth today. No going off there in the ethos. So I'm going to stop here before I wander off into the ethos. Wonderful to spend this time with you. Your assignments this week are to stay healthy and be ready for satisfaction next week. You all take care. Bye-bye now.
Take care, folks.